Rovers being used by Southern Electricity Board. And I mentioned about the difficulties they had trying to source a replacement. And one vehicle that was a really sort of left field attempt at a replacement was when they bought 19 Russian-built UAZ452 vans. This was about, I think about 1979-80, because they wanted a 1-ton payload 4x4, which pretty commonplace today, but back then was quite unusual. So there weren't very many vehicles that fit that role. Land Rover had stopped making the 1-ton in 1977. So come the early 80s, late 70s, you need a replacement. So they ended up with these Russian vans. They were imported and converted to right-hand drive. There was a company called UMO who imported a lot of Russian kit, mainly for heavy civil engineering. So they were importing like balehouse trucks, which were Kras, rebadged as bailouts in the UK. Just passing a horse. And yeah, they were importing these vans, never imported very many, but they were bringing them in, converting them, so assume that's where they were getting them from, because they were a 1-ton payload 4x4. We don't really know a great deal about them. I do have some photos which I'll share. They come from a chap called Keith Jeffries, he was a linesman for Southern Board out of Melksham Depot, and he took quite a few photographs of vehicles, certainly the Stage 1 V8 Land Rovers and a few others. But they had these UAZ vans, which, they were pretty rugged, obviously made for Russia, which is pretty unforgiving. Apparently they were very capable. I spoke to a few people who drove them, and they said they were very capable. They were at least as good off-road as a Land Rover. Parts were very cheap, they were simple to work on. But what is interesting is that the couple of photographs I've got, I can see the number plates, and those vehicles were scrapped at like 3 or 4 years old. So they didn't last very long in service, just more riders. They didn't last very long in service, so 3-4 years. I think I found a little batch, there's something like CJH something V, I'll put the plates in the comments. So from what I can gather, they had 19 of them. This would have been in the run-up to, well, a little before Land Rover said, hey, we're going to do this crew cab version of the 110, what became the 127, which became the sort of the standard SEB Land Rover in the 80s, was a 127 V8. They also had some V8 110s. Because these UAZ were a little 4-cylinder petrol engine, and the engine is between the seats, so a forward control. I mean, looks wise, similar styling to like a Volkswagen van, the old Mark 1 Transporter type 2, I'm not sure. I'm not a Volkswagen guy. They look similar to that, or similar to the old Commerce Space van. But they're actually still in production in a slightly modernised form. I think now they've got a diesel engine. The SEB ones were petrol, and they removed the front grille, extended the bumper, or bumper mounts and put a winch in the radiator aperture. Apparently they were pretty bad for overheating. Maybe having a winch where your grill should be might have played a part in that. But, you know, they were very capable apparently, but I think they maybe had issues getting parts. As I say, the ones I can see were only in use for sort of 3 or 4 years, which is a very short working lifespan for any vehicle really. And they would have been replaced with, let's say, Land Rover 110s or 127s. So far as I know, none exist. I've heard rumours of one, well, maybe two. I sort of occasionally speak with people who are into sort of Russian vehicles, and they said, yeah, there's, you know, someone has one, a van version, and then someone once mentioned to me they'd seen one with a cherry picker on. Whether that's SEB, I don't know. All of the references I have sort of in the SEB staff magazines, they're referred to as vans. And they had, you know, a typical ladder rack on the roof. And they were vans, but they did have an additional side window, I think, on one of the sides. So, yeah, if anybody knows anything, please let me know. I think it's a really interesting little bit of history that we had what was essentially a British government body buying Soviet-built 4x4 vans in 1979-80, and it would be nice to know what happened to them. My inkling is either they couldn't get them to run properly. One comment I heard a few times was cabs tended to fill with petrol vapour. So obviously you're sat, you know, either side of the engine. And also you think, you know, what was parts supply like? So yeah, if anybody knows anything, knows more, drop a comment. If you find this interesting, let me know, give it a thumbs up. You know, like, subscribe, whatever. You know, if you don't, there'll be more to come. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting little subject. I think they're quite cool. I actually had a notion of buy one. You know, you can get them pretty cheaply. Like get one from Poland or something. Convert it right on drive, paint it up. You know, as something of a replica. It'd be nice to obviously have a genuine one, but a replica would also be kind of fun. And you could probably make it into a bit of a camper or something, you know. But I do wonder what reliability would be like. But yeah, you do see them around online anyway. They've got a little bit of a following. There's plenty of videos of them off-road. Must admit, they look pretty capable. So yeah, that's all I got on these. Like I say, give it a like, the sub, and let me know what you think. And if you know more, please let me know. And it'd be amazing to find one, even if it's just a wreck, just to have a look. You know, yeah, it'd be really cool. So let's see. I mean, in the shorty. It's Good Friday. It's a day off work, so I'm just gonna chill out. I need to go buy petrol, so I need to go to the bank and get a loan. I actually filled up the 110 yesterday, 182 a litre for diesel. Petrol's 160 something. It's